And you're watching special coverage of Nigeria's 2023 presidential election here on Arise News. I'm Charles Anyegolu.
And I am Adesua Omoron. Well, let's take a look at the elections here in the Federal Capital Territory. There's controversy brewing over the interpretation of Section 134, subsection 2 of the 1999 Constitution as amended, which states that a candidate for an election to the office of president shall be deemed to have been duly elected where there have been more than two candidates for the election. He has the highest number of votes cast at the election, and he has not less than 1/4 of the votes cast at the election, each of at least 2/3 of all states in the Federation and the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja.
And it is, of course, the Federal Capital Territory. That's the big issue here. And if there's one man who can figure out what all this means, it's got to be Frank Tietie, who's a lawyer and a Rise News analyst. Frank, great to see you, as always. The vice presidential candidate of the Labour Party, Dr. Yusuf Datti Baba Ahmed, put out a tweet saying that the PDP and APC failed to get the constitutional 25% requirement in the FCT. Nobody can be declared the president. The FCT just saved Nigeria from the crisis of succession and further destruction. How do you read that?
Well, if the FCT didn't matter, it wouldn't have been expressly mentioned in the provision of Section 134 as just been read out. You know, all you need to do is an inversion of the statement by putting it the last first, by saying a candidate will have to win if he has the highest vote. That's fundamental. Then it goes on to say he would have to have a quarter of all the votes cast in each state out of the 2/3 of all the states of the Federation and the FCT. So if you change it and you say he has to have a quarter of all the votes cast in the FCT, number one, and then proceed to have a quarter of all the votes cast in each of the states or in the 2/3 of all the states.
But let's just be clear that are you talking about all of them being seen as one block?
No. Section 299 of the Constitution may refer to the FCT as a state. We refer to it to be considered as a state. However, when it comes to the provision of election, considering the special status of the FCT, being a coalescence of Nigeria, being a reflection of true Nigeria, because the whole essence, you need to look at the purpose of a provision, which is to say you don't only have to have a popular vote, but your vote has to be spread across the entire, representative of the federating units of Nigeria, so that you can be seen as the president of a whole Nigeria and not necessarily a section.
Yeah, but
that's the reason why the FCT is special. So just a simple inversion, tells you that first condition is that get 2/3 of the vote, get a quarter of all the votes in the FCT, then go and get a quarter of all the votes in all the states, not less than 24.
Yeah, but doesn't it mention
states.
the FCT for the simple reason that the FCT is not a state? So it can say you must get this in 36 states and the FCT.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. That is it. But in breaking it down, because we've seen the several interpretations that have been put out, now, and then the strong point, the other points that the other alternative point that they prove is that, okay, simply which Femi Falana pushes, which is, I believe, is not quite really a reflection of the intention of the drafters of the Constitution, is to consider the FCT as a state, and then you now say we have 37 states, and then you have to have 2/3 of the 37 states and have 25 states. That's not quite right, because the Constitution made a sharp distinction. The Constitution would have simply said, oh, you have to have a quarter of votes in at least 2/3 of all the states. But it proceeded
but that would have exempted the FCT.
No, so it made it look special. I will borrow the expression used by Mike Igini, which is very, very apt. It says that just like an examination question, one of the questions, question one is compulsory, and then you can answer any other question among the other 36 questions.
The FCT is a compulsory question.
So the FCT is a compulsory question. That is, It is fundamental. You must win at least a quarter of all the votes cast in the FCT.
So that's 20, I mean, simple maths, because I have my calculator here. That's 24 states and the FCT.
Yes.
That's what the Constitution,
Minimum.
that is what it
Yes.
says.
So basically,
minimum.
you're looking at 25 there, not 25.
Not 25 states.
Not 25 states. You can win 30 states. You can actually win 35 states. But you must have a quarter of all the votes cast in the FCT.
The FCT is assuming a
Right.
special
Of
position
course,
now.
that's the provision of the
Have we
Constitution.
ever had a president
That's
emerge
exactly what I was going to ask.
without winning the
yeah.
FCT?
That's a question of facts, and that issue hasn't arisen before. At the time that Nigerian jurisprudence actually dealt with this, was the last time was in 1979, and at that time there was no FCT. So what matters is that if you look at the presidents we've had over the years, they've always had landslide victories and across the entire state. So this hasn't ever come up as an issue.
Right.
But right now it's becoming an issue because the provision you're looking at talks about where the election, is where the participants in the election more than two candidates.
Yes.
What we've had predominantly in our history, in our recent history of elections, just two
political
parties.
parties, yes.
So that is easy to actually determine.
Right, but what happens if you win, let's say, 27 states, but you don't win the FCT?
The same point I have made. That is the fundamental, crucial thing. Fundamental means the foundation upon which any win must stand is that you have to win the FCT. Now, that's the expression of the Constitution, to the extent that why would the Constitution expressly mention the FCT if it wanted it to be, joined with the entire the 36 states?
But it's never been tried in a court, though. It's never been tested in a court.
No, yeah, because of this predominant, prevailing different, discordant views that have been out there. Some of them held by senior advocates of Nigeria and professors of law. But take a look at Mike Igini, who has had a very long years of experience working in the Independent National Electoral Commission, who holds the view, and quite correctly so, that it is the express mention of the FCT. And I don't want to actually, at this time, I would rather leave it to the courts to apply the esse jusdem generis rule. That is, it's quite complex. When you mention, if you wanted all of them to be together, you wouldn't mention them expressly, differently. So it's important. The point again we keep making is that just simply invert, because when you either in logic, there are times you need to convert a statement, you invert it, you invert it just to get at the truth. So in interpretation of statutes, you have to look at the intention of the drafters. The intention in this case is that the person must, to become president, must be seen as not only a popular candidate, but a candidate that does represent the total interest of Nigeria. And again, you have to consider that if the FCT was to be expressly considered as a state to be joined to make it the 37th state, the Constitution wouldn't have actually mentioned it in that provision.
So you're saying it's not just semantics to have "and" expressly stated in that section of the Constitution, to say you have to win 2/3 of votes in at least 24 states.
Of all the states.
Of all the states.
And the FCT.
And the FCT.
Yes.
But, it looks like this will end up in the courts regardless of the outcome of this election for the interpretation of this, because we have the major opposition political parties pulling out and dismissing whatever is going on at National Coalition Center. But we do have a case where Labour Party has won the Federal Capital Territory in landslide, and other political parties are unable to meet the 25% requirement. So it does look like it will still end up in the court.
Perfectly so, because at this time, when you have the cacophony of voices regarding the opinions concerning this particular provision of the law, definitely they'll be headed to the Court of Appeal.
Right. I've just got a text from someone saying, I'm one of the framers of the 1999 Constitution, and I won't mention the name of the person. The opinion expressed by the lawyer you're interviewing is not necessarily correct if the intention of the drafters is the basis of his opinion. I'm not quite sure I understand this, what he's saying, then he is wrong. Well, I mean, I can't pass judgment because you're a lawyer.
I think he's quite, his position is limited to if I am making a limitation to the intention. No, intention is just one small part when you apply, that you apply in interpretation of statutes. It's not wholesome.
But one
Actually,
thing that is clear
Yes.
is that this issue is going to be controversial.
Oh yes, it is already controversial.
Yeah.
But if you look at it literally, literally you just simply need to invert it, and you see that the FCT is distinct from the 36 other states.
Well, actually, in fairness to your argument, every single text I have received on this is supporting what you're saying, apart from that one that went the other way. It's saying that if the framers of the Constitution intended the FCT to be a state, the requirement would have been including FCT, but in this case it says and FCT, meaning
And to a large extent,
Right.
I even agree with him. Because, I'm careful, because you need to look at decisions of the Supreme Court with regards to definition of terms like and or. They are not quite, certain. There are certain times where the Supreme Court decided and to be conjunctive or disjunctive. So in this case, it is the disjunctive, sense that the Constitution is being read. But the goal of interpretation of statute is actually
Right.
to go into the minds of those who drafted it. They are no longer there, and they don't have the opportunity to say this is what we meant.
And that's
so
it,
and that's the reason why the courts.
Frank.
Sorry, finish what you're saying.
It's on the screen for everyone to see, and that's Section 134 of the 1999 Constitution as amended, and it stipulates there that for 2 or more presidential candidates, that's what we have at the moment because we have 18 political parties and 4 front runners. It says there in subsection 1, a candidate for an election to the office of the president shall be deemed to have been duly elected where there have been only 2 candidates for the election. A, it has the majority of votes cast at the election, and B, it has not less than 1/4 of the votes cast at the election in each of at least 2/3 of all the states in the federation and
the federal capital. So you're actually
Abuja.
right.
Yeah, but that's the provision, and then
it goes further,
the following
indeed.
subsection actually deals with the presentation.
In fact,
Yes, yes.
let me tell you this. I'm just getting a text from the respected former president of the Nigerian Bar Association, Olisa Abakoba San, and he's saying Frank is very correct that if a candidate doesn't win FCT, he won't be declared, period. He says he wrote a letter to INEC about this so that there can be clarification and it'll be clear, and they ignored his letter. But he's saying that this is so clear and to him so trite that he's shocked that anyone can say there is any confusion.
Oh, yes, but nobody can doubt the legal foresight of Olisa Abakoba. He's been doing patriotic work, especially in regards to constitutional law. And most times, like this, he tries to give direction. In this case, he raised this proposal much earlier enough for there to be clarification, or even if he had his own highly erudite thoughts about it. And so it's good that he's expressing it that way.
Interesting. I guess we'll have to wait to see how all of this
Yes.
goes. But it's quite simple English. But
Yeah,
when it
it
comes
is,
to
isn't it?
politics in Nigeria,
of
the more
course.
you
That's
get,
the thing about the law, isn't
Yeah.
it? Is that the slightest nuances can completely turn something around.
Because it does have a lot of implications.
Yeah.
You see, the FCT holds a special status, and Nigeria. There's something peculiar about Nigeria, and these things are beginning to show up in this democratic process. That is, you have to have a special interest in the FCT. The FCT holds something quite significant in emerging as the president of this country. So, interestingly, no matter the number of opinions that are out there, the courts must actually decide this very quickly.
And Section 299 of the Constitution states expressly as well that the provisions of the Constitution will apply to the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja, as if it were one of the states of the Federation.
Expressly so, but nevertheless, when it comes to consideration of having a quarter of votes in a particular, in each state to emerge as president, you separate the FCT. If not, if the FCT is considered as a state, the Section 134 would not have referred to and the FCT, would have simply said 2/3 of all the states. So by an express mention of the FCT shows that you've got to separately make that qualification in the FCT. Very fundamental.
Frank, it's been a brilliant education, I have to say.
Thank
you.
Always lovely talking with you. And
pleasure.
don't go far away, because we may need you to interpret a lot of other things. Frank Tietie is a lawyer and, of course, a Rise News analyst.